So we're studying ecology, and for me, ecology is basically what I took as an undergraduate at college. I studied ecology, ecosystems, environmental studies. Part of when I was in my master's degree program, I was making computer models of ecosystems and things like that. So this is sort of the things I was very interested in when I was in college. What's that?
Can we do that?
Not in this class you can, but you can eventually. You know, the things I was studying was like a mixture of sort of computer science and ecology, because sort of trying to predict how various types of species of trees would do given the environmental conditions around them, things like that. But it's a very, it's a field. Computer modeling of ecosystems is a real field in which there's a lot of research, especially in regards to climate change. Because as the Earth's climate changes due to global warming and the buildup of carbon dioxide, to predict sort of what effects that might have on the Earth, basically scientists use computer models to do that. Okay? They try to figure out how is the environment going to change, how will it change in carbon dioxide affect temperature, how will it affect plants, how will it affect animals, how will it affect other non-living factors in the ecosystem. And putting all that together is pretty complex. It takes a lot of computer power, a lot of thought, and so it's an area sometimes called like computational biology, using computers and mathematics to sort of interpret science.
Are those white things clouds?
Yeah, those are clouds. So when we study ecology, thanks for the notification. Ecology is science of studying living things in their environment. So not just the living things in isolation. So like in biology or zoology or botany, you may study plants or specific animals in the lab and things like that. Ecology is studying these living things and the environment around them, how they relate to their environment, how their environment affects them, how they affect each other. And a lot of you sort of talked about that when you were giving me your answers, so, you know, interactions and things living in and off of each other. So the first thing we're going to talk about is sort of when we talk about the Earth in ecology, kind of break it up into different categories, different components. And some of those are listed here. So one of the larger categories, or one of the larger levels of organization, is an ecosystem. Basically, like we just said, an ecosystem is an area where living things are interacting with each other. You know, you can think of this courtyard out here as an ecosystem. Even though it's not very complex and not very big, there's several different types of species out there. They interact with each other, they affect each other. So that's an ecosystem. A small ecosystem, but it is one. Sometimes they're really big. An ocean ecosystem, a large desert. Geographically, it's very large. Or it could be really small, like our courtyard. Like a puddle that's drying up, like a rotten log could be considered its own small little ecosystem, because we have all types of living things there interacting. So if we're thinking about an ecosystem, let's use, I guess, the courtyard as an example. If we imagine that ecosystem, we can then further break down the courtyard ecosystem into two parts: the community and the habitat. The community are all the living things out there, which would include what? Well, let's be more specific.
Like grass?
The grass is a part of that ecosystem, yes. Well, let's be more specific. We've talked about those trees, right?
Bird tree.
The birch tree, Betula papyrifera, that's a white birch. Pinus strobus, Thuya occidentalis out there. So yeah, those are several species of trees. What else?
Worms.
What? Worms in the soil, bacteria in the soil. Ducks.
Squirrel.
There have been years when we've had ducks in that courtyard.
How do they get in?
They fly in.
Ducks can fly.
Ducks? Yeah, ducks can fly.
I didn't know ducks could fly home though.
You never saw ducks like flying over the water or something? Yeah, ducks can fly. They're not a chicken though. Chickens can fly, depends on the type of chicken and so forth. Gaetano, squirrels? Yeah, squirrels, maybe some mice, chipmunks, there might be like some snakes, various types of birds. All of those are part of the community out there. They're like the residents of your area, like where you live, your development, your neighborhood. The people that live there would be an example of the community. The habitat is sort of the location, the place, the non-living parts. Sort of like the buildings around where you live would be the habitat. In that courtyard, all those things you just named, the living things are interacting with each other, they affect each other. You know, the number of snakes in there would affect the number of mice, the amount of grass and food available would affect the mice population, and so forth. So those populations are interacting with each other. We can then talk about further, in that community, we might talk about a specific population. When we talk about a population, how is that different from the community? Okay?
So, the community is like all of the species that are in there, that are in that ecosystem, and then the population is just focused on one specific.
Exactly. Population is one specific species. So like I asked you to be more, so you said not just plants and trees, but let's be specific. So give me an example of a population from the courtyard ecosystem, a single population. What?
4,000 ducks.
Okay, well, not quite.
Number.
We could have a numbers, okay. We could talk about the number, the size of the population, but there's something wrong with what Vlad just said.
Like, we don't think.
Yeah, what's wrong with what Vlad
He
said?
said, like, a specific, like, he said, like, something smaller in a bigger picture, like trees. You say trees, like birch trees, pine trees.
Right.
maple trees.
So what Vlad said, ducks.
That's
That's too broad?
Birds, yeah.
It's a duck.
You know, but there's not specific enough, it's actually the opposite. Because there's different types of ducks,
The ones with green heads.
which are called mallard ducks. So you could say the population of mallard ducks in the courtyard, that's a specific population. You know, you can't say trees, you have to say gray birch trees. You might have to say white pine trees. Okay, so you have to be specific as to the species. And then finally, or example, all the bullfrogs in a pond, that's a population. But if you said all the fish in a pond, that's not a population. You have to be specific. Today, this morning, I was running before school, and I was running up the road, and a skunk went across the road. And it turned around and looked at me, and then it turned around and put its tail up, like it's going to spray.
Were you scared?
I didn't want to get sprayed, but I just kept running, turned around, kept going. Anyway, the last topic is diversity. So what does that term mean, like in just everyday usage?
Diversity?
Yeah. What?
Difference.
Differences. You know, you might talk about the diversity of a neighborhood or of a school. You know, very diverse groups of people from lots of different places, right? Different ethnicities, different races, different religions, and so forth. That's diversity, how we might use it in sort of cultural context. What do you think it means about in science? If I talk about the diversity of the courtyard ecosystem versus the diversity of the forest ecosystem out near where we go for lunch.
They're different.
How? Tell me how they're different, Kate. Yeah, which would be a more diverse ecosystem you think? Yeah, the forest ecosystem has a greater diversity. We sometimes call it biodiversity, meaning living. It's the number of different types of living things. Courtyard's not very diverse because it's enclosed. There's not tons of different living things there, but there are some. As we talk about ecosystems, we can talk about biotic and abiotic factors that are present. Have you guys heard these words?
No.
You probably can figure out what they mean by the names, biotic and abiotic. If we think about, let's think about this ecosystem in the picture. Obviously, quite diverse, lots of different plants, animals, and so forth, living things, non-living things. Okay? We could talk about in this ecosystem some of the biotic factors.
Oh, wait a second.
Can you guess what that means?
Yeah.
Biotic? Luke?
Like, well, antibiotic means like get rid of germs. So like biotic means like germs or like disease or.
Not quite, but that's a good way to think about it.
So like,
Kaden?
biotic means like natural, and abiotic means like not natural.
Not quite. What?
Like, I don't know, but like I kind of feel like it would be like kind of like, I don't know, like something hazardous because like, I mean like something with like, I can't really explain it like the way.
You're thinking of bio.
Because like when I heard the word biotic, I started thinking of biohazard.
Oh, well, let's talk about the root then.
Yeah.
A biohazard.
Means two.
No. Bi means to. Bio means something completely different. A biohazard. Biology.
Micro.
Jack?
I don't know which plants and animals, living and non-living things.
Almost. You were really close.
What do you say?
So I think biotic is like water and logs and like things like that.
Not quite. Meg? No, almost the opposite. Kaden?
Biotic is like the factors the animals have on each other, and abiotic is like the factors that the water has on the
You're getting closer. So biology is the study of what? No, that's zoology.
Living things.
Living things. Biotic factors are living things.
That's what he said. He said living things and non-living things.
Well, that's not
Yes,
it.
we didn't specify.
Because abiotic factors are
No.
non-living things. When you put the prefix a before something, it means like not. Like atypical. Typical and atypical. Not typical. So, living factors in this ecosystem, frogs, trees, the turtles, the bacteria living there, the mushrooms, the protists, anything that's alive. And it does include plants. And abiotic factors, non-living things. So what are some abiotic factors that would be important
Dirt.
in this raise your hand, please, in this ecosystem? Sophia? The water would be a big one. Obviously, it's a pond ecosystem. Water's not living, but it certainly is important in this ecosystem. What are some other things? It might not necessarily something you see. It could be something you just know. Jackson?
Oh, I was gonna say like maybe like the lily pads for
No, because they're alive.
oh,
So they're biotic factors. Rena? The air. The oxygen in the air. The carbon dioxide. Can you think of other things? What? The soil, rocks, the ground. How about they're not actually, it's not a thing, but like a condition of the water or of the air? What? Temperature, oxygen levels, pH, all those factors that can alter the ecosystem are important. Water, oxygen, carbon dioxide, temperature, and so forth.
Who's your heroes? When's our final?
The last 2 days of class.
Oh, like the 2 day thing?
2 days of Yes.
Do you know how long there is? Like how many questions?
Fair number. Some.
Is it more than 100?
We'll be back. All right. So obviously, for any ecosystem, there must be energy. All living things need energy. And the ultimate source of that energy in an ecosystem is generally the sun. There are some exceptions, but we're not going to get into them. Pretty much all ecosystems require the sun. And what sort of living organisms use the sun's energy, capture it, store it? Gabe?
Like plants when they go over your frozen.
Yeah, plants. What are some terms we use for a plant? There's a couple of terms we might use. Hang on. I kind of gave you one. Which of these words means plants? Well, producer. There's another term for them, a more sciencey sounding word. It means self-feeding. Autotroph. Yeah. So producers, autotrophs, they take energy from the sun, use it to make what?
Food.
No, something better than that.
Glucose.
Glucose. In the process of, which happens in the,
Chloroplast.
and requires,
Sun.
and
Carbon
Sugar.
dioxide.
carbon dioxide and,
And, no,
Everything.
APT.
no.
No.
Now we're mixing up two different
And
things.
everything.
Oxygen.
No,
O2, water.
you're just saying words. It requires
Carbon dioxide.
sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. It produces, you already told me, glucose and
Oxygen.
oxygen. Alright, so producers are mainly plants. In an ecosystem, generally we'll talk about plants as the autotrophs. So again, they take the sun's energy and then they store it up in glucose, in the bonds between glucose. Okay, where do other things get energy then? How do we get energy? We can't just lay in the sun and get glucose. How do we get energy, Evan? By consuming calories and food. By consuming other organisms. We are consumers. Organisms that have to eat other things to get energy are called consumers. What's the technical term for a consumer? Heterotroph. They have to eat other organisms. We are all consumers. There's also a group of organisms in ecosystems called decomposers. And decomposers, what is their job in an ecosystem? Some people I haven't heard much from today. Julia?
It's like when a non-living, it's just an organism that kind of eats the non-living.
Doesn't it break things down?
Not quite eats the non-living. Jack?
It's like, it's mostly fungus, isn't it? That like breaks things down and like uses their energy.
Yeah. A decomposer is an organism that basically takes dead organisms, dead plants and animals, and waste products from them, and breaks that down and returns nutrients back to the soil. Mostly fungi and bacteria are considered the primary decomposers. You know, if a squirrel gets run over on the side of the road after a couple weeks, it's gone, basically. It's decomposed. Animals have eaten it. Bacteria, fungi have broken down the tissue in it. Some of those nutrients go back into the soil and can be reused by plants. What ecological, so what is this trying to say, this little cartoon here? Why is this, Hayden? Yeah, and this is important. This would have been a good cartoon. I know you guys said earlier in the year, you studied this for 8 months last year. DDT. How does this relate to DDT?
Oh, I remember.
Sophia?
Okay, so when like the DDT like for like fish when it got into the water, it got into the fish's like body. So like when they had like eggs, I guess it was like in the eggs. So like all like the fish that hatched were like they had the DDT in the body.
Yeah, So this is a concept called biomagnification. That things like DDT that were spread all over, even in small amounts, the tiniest little organ, little plants that picked it up, tiny little krill, microscopic organisms, would get just a little bit of this DDT in them. But then the organism that eats them eats a lot of them. You know, to eat tiny little microscopic organisms, to make it get enough energy, you eat a lot of them. So how much DDT do those organisms get? Definitely more. And then the organisms that eat them, slightly larger carnivores, eat a lot of those small little organisms, and they get even more of the DDT. By the time you reach the top levels of the ecosystem of the food chain, like the bald eagles, all of those toxins had accumulated, and they were exposed to much higher amounts because of that process. And that's kind of what this cartoon tries to portray. So often when we think about an ecosystem, we put together diagrams called food chains and food webs. So you did this before, right? What does a food chain show you? Like, what information does a food chain diagram give? Kevin, Kate?
Like the food chain, like the order of something that eats.
Yeah, it tells you what eats what, which eats something else, which eats something else. It shows the flow of energy through an ecosystem. It always has to start with what?
A producer.
A producer. You need something that can take the sun's energy and get it into a physical form. And those are producers. Food chains show predator-prey relationships. So we always start with producers in our food chain. Even before I put any names here, you guys can tell me which of these is a producer.
Yes.
How would you know that? How do you know, if you don't have any words in there, how would you know which is the producer? The autotroph. Well?
It's in the beginning.
Well, okay. A little more specifically, Luke,
It's usually like a plant.
but I don't have any names. How am I gonna know?
Picture. It doesn't
Yeah,
have
like,
eyes or anything.
but it's not
green.
an animal.
No, I'm saying from these boxes,
Oh,
I can tell you right now which is the
It's the
producer.
one that doesn't
Yeah.
eat anything.
Yes, it's the one with, so in a food chain, it's the one without what? Arrows pointing
To the right.
Forward.
towards it. The wheat doesn't eat anything. It absorbs energy from the sun, but we don't include the sun in a food web or a food chain.
Who eats the sun?
Nobody.
We do.
Sun's energy. All right. So something eats the wheat. Let's make it a mouse. And a snake, and then an eagle. Arrows always point from what was eaten to what ate it. Think about it, like the wheat is going into the mouse's mouth. The mouse goes into the snake's mouth. The snake goes into the eagle's mouth. So we have our producer, which has no arrows pointing towards it. What's the rest of this?
Predators.
What are these? Those are consumers. But we also sometimes label what level consumer they are. What do you think we call the mouse?
Like a
First level
primary.
consumer. Primary, you could call it a primary consumer. And what would you call the snake? Secondary, second level consumer, third level consumer, and so forth.
Tertiary.
Tertiary, yeah. Now in this diagram, however, the mouse is not a first level consumer. What is it?
The grasshopper.
Second.
The second level consumer. The grasshopper is a first level consumer. So it depends on the specific food chain that you're looking at. Finish up with this. These are all terms I know you're familiar with, so when we talk about food chains and food webs, sometimes classify organisms with some terms. An herbivore. What's an herbivore? What's that mean, that word? Jackson?
Means they eat
They eat plants only. They're also called first level consumers. First level consumers eat plants only. I am an herbivore. You guys are mostly all something else.
Wait, so you don't.
None of you are carnivores.
You eat like chips.
What?
Chips?
Yeah.
So that's potatoes.
It doesn't eat any meat.
Yeah, I do eat milk and eggs.
So you're not a vegan.
I'm not a vegan, I'm a vegetarian.
Have you
I'm
ever
an
had
ovo-lacto-vegetarian.
What?
Ovo means,
You eat fish?
Oval.
I am an ovo-lacto-vegetarian.
What's that?
You tell me.
Here.
You can have like milk and eggs.
Lacto,
Oh, yeah.
You eat fish?
milk and eggs. I do eat milk and eggs. A
Oh.
person that does not eat milk and eggs or any animal products is
It's
a
vegan.
vegan.
So do you
So you basically eat the animal like
So you
products,
don't
but
eat
not
I
the
do
animal.
not eat any animals.
not fish?
Not
Wait, but
fish.
you eat them.
But you
It's
just
a
said
animal's
animals
food
eat.
source.
I don't know anything with father.
Yeah, probably.
It's still killing
Have
you.
you ever had any meat?
Not really.
Grass
Yeah.
animal?
I only became a vegetarian on January 1st, 1993.
Guys, how to think of it like this way. There'll be a cow and kill it.
I read a book about meat and I was studying environmental studies and I learned about the environmental impacts and health impacts of food and then I decided, my New Year's resolution was I was gonna give up eating meat. And I'm still holding to that New
Yeah,
Year's
do you eat like
resolution.
fake vegetarian meat?
Yeah,
You
no.
basically
Oh,
do
veggie.
veggie.
Yeah, you eat vegetarian.
Yeah, most people don't even go a week without breaking
Oh, yeah,
New Year's
vegetarian.
resolution.
Some people do got
I
time.
gave up on
Wait,
McDonald's.
so you're
What?
When you're eating potato chips, you're basically eating animals because say an animal was burned by the sun because it died. So the sun basically ate the animal. Then the grass eats the sun. I mean the grass.
This is
Alright.
Alright, carnivore. Tell me what a carnivore is. Luke?
Oh, it's like a meat eater.
A meat eater, only a meat eater. Some animals are carnivores, they eat only meat.
Lions.
So a carnivore is a second or third or fourth level consumer. You are all probably omnivores. An omnivore eats both plants and animals. Talk about in an ecosystem the predator and prey. Predator is the hunter, thing that eats other organisms. The prey is what gets eaten. The hunter and the hunted.
Basically everything's a predator.
What?
Basically everything's a predator.
Not everything.
Well, most
not.
Herbivores are not considered predators usually.
Because the plant can't
They
run
don't
away.
prey on plants, technically. Although some scientists do use the term predator. They say that herbivores are predators of plants.
Oh, so basically,
Predator.
a mouse is like stalking a blade of grass,
I
and then
guess.
it like bites and breaks its back.
Alright, heterotrophs and autotrophs. Heterotrophs, we talked about already, do not make their own food. They have to eat other organisms. They're consumers. And autotrophs do make their own food. They use the sun's energy to make glucose, and that's what they use for their energy source in photosynthesis. All right, any questions about any of that?
Have you ever seen people that try to be vegan for a week?
I would go crazy.
I think
Because I have at least 2 bowls of cereal.
I think